My name is Jeff Howell, and my mom died when I was 18 years old. Some of you may know that part of my story. About 10 days after my 18th birthday, my mom passed away. She passed away from complications dealing with multiple sclerosis. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a disease that attacks the sheathing or the protective coating of a person's nerves. Disrupts the signal going from the sensor within the other part of the nerve as it travels up to the brain. So over time, it gets worse and worse and worse, and it makes you susceptible to infections. And that was what ultimately killed my mom, was an infection. She was sick my entire life. She was diagnosed when she was in her teenage years. She met my dad and they got married. But when they were married, she was in remission. About 3 years after they were married, they had me. The doctors were telling her that they should have a C-section or whatever. Anyway, she ended up having me naturally, and that really wasn't good for her body. And because of that, she ended up coming out of remission. So I never got to know her as a healthy person. She was always bedridden. She was always in a wheelchair my entire life. And growing up for a little while, that was pretty earth-shattering for me to think about. That, was I the cause of her coming out of remission? Was it my fault? I always had these questions about why was it my mom that was suffered with this affliction? I dealt with those things for quite a long time, and it was frustrating, to say the least, growing up, to not have the answers to those questions. And I still don't. But I think my faith is one of the things that kind of gets me through it, and understand that sometimes those bad things just happen. So it wasn't until recently where I began to go through this process of self-discovery and questioning. Part of me is able to look at, well, what happened because of her illness? What sort of things occurred that is helping me now? Some of the relationships or people that we met, through some of the people that had to come and help my mom, I was introduced to an organization called 4-H. Through 4-H, I was able to be a part of things like a role-playing group that I was a part of, introduced me to a family that was closely tied to a church that I started doing youth ministry in. Ultimately, it got me to Minneapolis at North Central, and then met my wife. And I can look at some of the decisions and people that we met through my mom's illness who got me where I am now. And if you look at those positive things, that kind of helps make the situation kind of easier to deal with. I think it's one of the things that sort of makes me stronger, but it also makes me weak in some areas as well. There's a dichotomy to that, and sometimes it's hard to rationalize where you pull your strength from those particular events that you have no control over. So what benefits do those experiences have for you, just you growing up as a regular human being? That situation has had a profound effect on me. The trick is to learn how do those events that you have zero control over ultimately benefit you. I guess this is less of an encouragement and just more kind of telling my story about what I've had to deal with. Perhaps you had an earth-shattering event that you've had to grapple with, something that you had no control over. The trick is, how do you respond to those things? How can you use the things that you have no control over? How do you use those things to benefit your environment, your employer, your business? The resiliency that you have when you're dealing with things that are out of your control is ultimately what matters. I hope this has been a little bit of an encouragement to you. How you respond to things out of your control is what ultimately matters. Thank you always for watching, and we'll see you next time.